Hi, my name is Austin Cott. I had the opportunity to administer the KTEA 3 to a Becky. So the KTEA is an achievement test, and it's measured to assess the academic achievements of the areas of math, reading, and writing. So Becky is in fourth grade. She is 9 years old. She has a very supportive family. They work with her a lot at home. She's a very hard worker in school as well. Generally has a good attitude. Both parents and teachers have concerns though on her academic growth, especially in the area of math. This test took place in a kitchen that free of distractions and in a quiet setting. So the first area was in the area of reading. So the reading composite is made up of two subtests, letter and word recognition and reading comprehension. So in the area of her reading composite was an 85, which is in the 16th percentile and the low average range. So the first subtest is letter and word recognition. In this subtest, the student is to identify letters and pronounce words that continue to increase in difficulty as the test moves on. So an example would be that I point to a word printed that said shirt. The student would need to read that word and correctly say it. Her standard score was 94, which put her in the 34th percentile, and that measured in the average range. So she had success with words at her grade level, but as words started to get more challenging, I could see that she started to get a little bit more frustrated. And some of the miscues that I noticed was that she started to use long vowels in place of short vowels, and especially as those words got longer. So an example was if I pointed to wilderness, she pronounced it wilderness. The second part is reading comprehension. This subtest measures students' ability to understand print. So they are given a short passage to read, and then I ask questions about that passage. So as the test continues, the stories or passages continue to get longer, and the questions continue to get a little trickier as well. There are two kinds of questions that are asked. The first is literal, so that would just be stating information that is directly in the text. And the second is inferential, so questions that aren't directly stated in the text. So they have to use information that they read and maybe apply some other skills in order to answer those questions. She measured in the well below average range with a standard score of 79, and that was in the 8th percentile. So Becky did really well on the shorter passages and on the literal questions, but once those passages started to get longer and more inferential questions were asked, that's when she started to have a little bit more trouble and got a little frustrated. So it is my recommendation that a small group reading instruction is put into place to help practice those comprehension skills. And some of the things that might be beneficial for her are the use of a graphic organizer and then story retell. So whatever she reads, putting that information into her own words and retelling, as well as using background knowledge. So making connections to her life. What does it remind her of what she's reading? So having those conversations before the story, during the story, as well as after the story. The second part was an area of math. This is also made up of two subtests, math concepts and applications, as well as math computation. She measured in the low average range with a standard score of 80, and that was in the 9th percentile. So the first subtest was math concepts and applications. This measures the student's ability to complete test items that focus on application of real life situations. So things that were included are number concepts, time, money, measurement, as well as geometry. She had a standard score of 76, which was in the 5th percentile and in the well below average range. Problems that involved ordering numbers. So I put an example of 45, 50, 55, and then there was a blank, and she needed to determine what was the pattern and write the next number. Those were more difficult for her. So, as well as reading a clock. So there was a picture of a clock and of a time, and she needed to write the time, though that was a little harder for her. So, my recommendation is in addition to the regular class instruction, that she have a small group instruction to practice those skills. The second part of the math portion of the test was math computation. So, this is where students are just given problems that basic addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And again, these continue to get more challenging as the test continues. They're printed in the student booklet, and this is an untimed test that she can go and solve these at her own pace. Her standard score was an 87th or 87. That put her in the 19th percentile in the well below average range. It's my recommendation that she does get some additional practice in the area of triple digit addition. So in the hundreds, adding and subtracting with regrouping. She was able to do it when it was just basic, no regrouping, but when she has to regroup one or two times, that's when she started to get a little frustrated and had more trouble. And she should also have more exposure to multiplication problems. So I recommend that a small group intervention is put into place 5 times a week to practice those skills, as well as progress monitoring her to kind of guide the instruction as well. The third part is written language. So this is made up of two subtests. The first one is written expression, and the second one is spelling. So in the area of written language, she had a standard score of 91, and that was in the average range and in the 27th percentile. So written expression, that's the first subtest. That measures the student's ability to express their thoughts and ideas on paper. So they were given a story booklet that they were to complete. Some of the tasks in that story booklet were completing sentences, adding punctuation, filling in missing words, and writing a story. So there could have been a sentence that didn't have an ending punctuation. So what they needed to do was read the sentence and decide, was it a question? Do they need to put a question mark? Do they need to put a period or exclamation point? There were sentences that had missing words in them, so they had to read the sentence and choose what would be the best word to complete that sentence. And then at the very end, using all of the information that was in that booklet, they had to write a story to go along with that. So in written expression, she had a standard score of 86, which is in the low average range and in the 18th percentile. So she was really excited to work and write a story. She did a really good job of listening to instructions and worked really hard in this subtest. She wrote some complete sentences, but her use of ending punctuation, so those periods, question marks, exclamation points, and her use of capital letters, not just at the beginning of a sentence, but those proper nouns, those were inconsistent throughout this subtest. So I recommend that a small writing group is put in place in addition to regular writing instruction, where an adult just checks in with her writings to ensure that she is using capital letters and ending punctuations. And it might not just even be in writing, it's just any time throughout the curricular areas that she is using those consistently. The second subtest in the written expression is spelling. So words are dictated or just I told her the words, and she is required to write those words down and spell them correctly. So as the test moves on, those spelling words do get more challenging. In this subtest, her standard score was 98, and that was in the average range and in the 45th percentile. So again, she had a really good attitude. She worked really hard. She was excited when she heard words that she was familiar with, and really had a lot of confidence with those words. When words started to get longer and had more complex spelling patterns in them or silent letters, that's when she had a little bit more trouble. So some examples were if the word was hurried, she spelled it with that Y instead of dropping the Y and just adding IED. And an example of a silent letter was in known. She spelled it NOWN instead of adding that K at the beginning. So it's just recommended that spelling be monitored by the classroom teacher. Overall recommendations, so small group reading instruction 5 times a week for 30 minutes. And in this, I really think she should focus on her comprehension skills. So, retelling that story, whether it's a fiction or a nonfiction story, having those conversations after she reads the story, as well as use as a graphic organizer to get her thoughts down and organized. It's also would be beneficial for her to use those prior knowledge, make those real life connections, asking, what does it remind you of? And doing that before the story, during the story, as well as after the story. In the area of math, I think small group instruction for 5 times a week is also recommended. So, using a progress monitoring to kind of guide your instruction and ensure that she is making progress. So, practicing and reinforcing triple digit addition and subtraction with regrouping, and then practicing multiplication using flashcards. Her writing tasks should also just be monitored to ensure that she's using proper punctuation, so periods, commas, exclamation points, question marks, as well as capital letters at the beginning of a sentence, as well as proper nouns throughout her sentences. Also, offering her breaks throughout the day, so making sure that things aren't overwhelming for her if she is working hard and she is a hard worker, but making sure that she does have breaks, that whether that's a break card that she could go and just take a quick 2 or 3 minute break and then come back and continue to work hard, and providing positive feedback, so making sure that she knows when she is working hard, going up and saying, hey, thanks for working so hard, or you're doing a great job. That was really important for Becky during this. So overall, she had a really, really good attitude during this assessment. I was really happy to work with her. It's my recommendation that we try these interventions and progress monitoring and see if she is making growth. And in the event that she doesn't make growth, I recommend additional interventions or possibly additional testing as well.